Anything else I'm missing before I start? Okay. I also want to just thank all of you so much for your congratulations to me for moving to the Arizona Senate. I also just want to let you know that I'm accepting condolences for the same office. So you can send, gifts of condolence to me at any time. It'll be easy to find me. There are only 9 Democrats in the state Senate. So I know, isn't that horrible? On the upside, the meetings are cheap. We're, like a 1 pizza caucus. So we're saving money, which you should do during tough times, I know, it's so sad. So there's been a lot of talk tonight already about the election. And I want to talk about that for a few minutes, about what last November meant and what it means for us today and in the future. So all of us worked our hearts out for this election. Did we not? We did. We worked our hearts out, not just for the folks who are running for local office here, but also for the folks who are running for Congress, our very own dear Ann Kirkpatrick, my former colleague in the state legislature and a wonderful, wonderful member of Congress. And we worked for Democrats up and down the ticket, including our own Terry Goddard, who I think we all would agree would make a better governor. Right. He's so smart, which is what I really enjoy. He's this very smart guy. Yeah. And I think we would probably all agree that if we had a different result in the last election cycle, we'd be hearing a different discussion in Arizona than the one we're hearing right now. So I think that creates a real challenge for us to step back and evaluate what happened in 2010 that made it so difficult for progressives to get their voices across and to win, not just here in Arizona, but in other parts of the country. That's a real challenge I think we face over the next 2 years. Now, we know that the results in Arizona were quite dismal. Not only was Jan Brewer elected, but all 5 statewide seats went to Republicans, including individuals like Tom Horn, our new Attorney General, John Huppenthal, our new Superintendent of Public Schools, all the way down to Doug Ducey, our new State Treasurer. There may be some perks about Ducey because he owns that ice cream company, so I've done a couple events with him and he has not yet offered me ice cream, so I'm still waiting. He probably knows I'm lactose intolerant. They do sell that ice cream to Democrats, though. You can actually buy it if you're a Democrat. So I know he is, at least in that manner, bipartisan. So that's good news. We saw in the state House and the state Senate that Republicans now control a supermajority. And for those who aren't familiar with the supermajority, well, one, I can understand that you wouldn't be, because Arizona hasn't faced a supermajority in my lifetime. Now, the Arizona legislature has been in control of the Republican Party for the last 40 years. But only this year do they have a supermajority. And a supermajority means that they control at least 2/3 of each chamber in the legislature. And what power that gives you is, one, you have plenty of extra votes whenever you need to pass something crazy or bad. It also means that you have enough votes to override the governor's veto if and when she ever would decide to veto anything, right? So this really shifts the balance of power in our state away from the historical checks and balances and really rests much of that power in the hands of the state legislature. And as you all probably saw in emails from me before the election, that I was very concerned about what the impact of the Senate elections would bring. And you may remember getting an email from me shortly before the election that said, by the way, if we lose even 1 seat in the state Senate, Russell Pierce will become the Senate president. If we lose 2 seats in the state Senate, Russell Pierce will be the Senate president and he'll have a supermajority. Well, you all know what happened. We lost 3 seats. And we lost 3 of our strongest Latino voices in the state legislature. Rebecca Rios, Amanda Aguirre, and Manny Alvarez. So we lost 3 stalwart, strong individuals who are fighting for families, for working Arizonans, and for Southern Arizona in particular. And in exchange, we got a Russell Pierce Senate presidency. Now, people across the country have asked me, what's wrong with Arizona, right? And let me rephrase that. People around the world. I went to China last summer, China, right? And so, like, the guy who worked in the Prime Minister's office in China said, oh, you're from Arizona, SB 1070. And I was like, oh, freedom of press. I don't think he got the pushback I was offering to him. But, yeah, so all around the world, people know what's happening in Arizona. And not in a good way, right? We're not famous like in a good way. We're kind of like in a Lindsay Lohan kind of famous way. Not good. So, so what we've seen in Arizona is, the takeover of the architect who actually created that notoriety for Arizona is now the state Senate president. And he is arguably the most powerful person in state government, right? He controls more than a supermajority in the state Senate, which means he has the ability and the power to dictate and direct the agenda. And we have already seen that in place. So we've been in session for 3 weeks now. Let me talk quickly about what we've seen in those 3 weeks. So the first Friday of session, which was only 5 days after we began, the governor released her budget. And in that budget, she not only plans to make massive cuts to our public education system and higher education, but she plans to eliminate health care for nearly 300,000 Arizonans. These are working Arizonans, the working poor, individuals who work every day to take care of their kids and their families, and she wants to eliminate their health care. Now, you probably have heard about it on national news or seen it in international news, that this is an unprecedented attempt. In fact, Governor Brewer is the only governor in the country that has decided that this is the appropriate remedy to the fiscal crisis. And you all know every state is facing a fiscal crisis, but Arizona is the only state in which the governor and the Republican leaders want to take away health care for 300,000 Arizonans. The good news is that she's not allowed to do it. Right, yeah, that's the good news. Thank goodness. There's 2 reasons. The first reason is that the new federal health care law, which each of you helped us pass in Congress in March of 2010, specifically says that states cannot reduce their access, or what we call access, or Medicaid rolls. So states are not allowed to, yeah, that's important. And the reason is quite simply this, that Congress's intent when they passed that law was to protect health care for those who had it, and then increase health care for those who didn't have it. So eliminating health care for 300,000 people doesn't actually meet that goal. So the governor has to get permission from the federal government in order to cut those 300,000 people from health care. Now I'm just going to go on a limb here. I don't have any inside information, but I do think I'm, kind of reasonably clued into what's happening. I don't think she's going to get permission, right? I'm thinking Obama's going to tell her to take a hike, right? Yeah, I know, isn't that great? So she's counting on this hope that the president is going to let her cut 300,000 people off of health care, which I think we can all say is probably not going to happen. But the second thing that keeps her from doing this is the Arizona Constitution. Now, I know a lot of people don't pay attention to it, but it is the founding document of our state, right? And the Arizona Constitution quite clearly says that if the voters pass an initiative, that the legislature and the governor cannot undermine it or reverse it. And in 2000, the Arizona voters, some of you probably included, certainly myself, voted for and passed a proposition called Healthy Arizona. And that was the initiative that created this access program for these Arizonans. So this program is actually protected not just by state law, but in our Constitution. She doesn't have the authority to take this health care away. In fact, if she wants to take the health care away, she has to get a waiver, not just from President Obama and his administration, but a waiver from the voters. Now, the governor has indicated that she has no interest in doing that. She plans to just cut the health care and then let us sue her, which I am eager to do. So we are working right now, yes. So we are working right now to prepare a lawsuit, if needed, to stop the governor from violating the will of the voters and denying health care for 300,000 people. Yeah, that's good news. So that was week 1, right? That was week 1. So then we moved on to week 2, and in week 2, we saw introduction of legislation to allow guns on school campuses. Yeah, my friend Jack Harper says that the students are, quote, sitting ducks without it. Well, I gotta tell you, I am an adjunct professor at Arizona State University, which means I teach part-time, and I've been doing it for quite some time, almost 10 years. And I cannot even imagine what it would be like to walk into a classroom knowing that people had guns, right? Because sometimes, I know this sounds horrible, but sometimes the students don't do very, sometimes someone just does a bad job. And you all know, when a student does a bad job, you have to give them bad grade, right? What I don't want is, like, you know, Johnny upset that he got a D on his paper and the, like, packing heat in the classroom, right? I think that it would be better for him to just kind of lodge a complaint. We'll mediate and talk through it. Maybe he can do some extra credit or something, right? But if we change the law and allow guns on campuses, I think we'll see an increase in violence on school campuses. So that's a big concern. So that was week 2. Week 3, though, week 3 has been the best. Week 3 has been good. That was this week. This week, we saw the introduction of legislation to question, once again, whether or not President Obama was born in Hawaii. Well, you have to know that he was born in Kenya, right? And he's Islamic, and he went to school in a jihadist school. You guys didn't know that? Where have you been? Just look it up on the internet. It's totally there. You know, we had this ridiculous legislation last year, and it passed the House of Representatives. You may remember that. It passed the House of Representatives. One of my colleagues actually went on TV with Anderson Cooper to defend the passage of the law. And you got to go, just Google it. Just Google YouTube, CNN, Anderson Cooper, birther. And he just eats this poor representative alive. And he asked him, you know, what leads you to think that Obama is not an American citizen? He said, well, I saw it on the internet. And then Anderson Cooper's like, well, I read on the internet the moon is made of green cheese. Like, do you think the moon is made of green cheese? And the representative was like, I don't know. It was a beautiful interview. It made me love Anderson Cooper in a whole new way. Welcome to Arizona. So that bill is back, and it has 41 sponsors. So that means that at least 41 members of the state legislature believe that Obama's not a citizen. Here's a little interesting note. It takes 47 votes, 31 and 16. It takes 47 votes to pass a bill out of the legislature. And they have 41 sponsors. So they just have to round up 6 more votes, and Arizona will then be the first state to question whether or not Obama is a citizen. I know, it's crazy. But no, this is the most pressing issue facing our state, I would think, don't you think? I mean, when I'm out talking to voters, like knocking on their doors, I'm like, I know the job situation's really bad, and people are struggling to feed their families, and you can't save for your kids' college anymore, and the classrooms are really crowded. We got 40 kids in a classroom, and what can I do to help you? And they say, well, Obama's not an American. That's always the first response I get. And yeah, I know. So then we also had another bill this week to modify the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. And most of us know the 14th Amendment as the amendment that granted citizenship to freed slaves. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery. The 14th Amendment granted citizenship to all freed slaves and their children. It's also the amendment that ensures equal protection under the law, which means we're all treated the same, and due process under the law, which means they can't, just lock you up without giving you a fair trial, etc. So some of my colleagues down at the Capitol don't like the 14th Amendment. It's kind of pesky, and so they want to just eliminate it. So there's some legislation that's been introduced this week to eliminate the 14th Amendment and to redefine what it means to be a citizen of this country. The problem is that apart from the fact that you can't do that, whatever, there's this whole thing about federalism, and it's complex, I know. It's usually covered in about 10th grade when you do American history, though. This whole idea of supremacy, like federal government and then state government, and we're working on that. So it's problematic, but what's even more problematic is that whoever wrote this legislation, I think, with all due respect, was probably drunk and did it on the back of a napkin. Because it's very poorly written. In fact, it's so poorly written that while it intends to deny citizenship to children who are born here in this country, if one or more of their parents are immigrants, that's the intent. What the impact is much, much worse. The impact dictates that if one of our active military soldiers were to have a child overseas while on active duty, that child would not be an American citizen. And ironically, if you kind of take a look back in history, that would have impacted our very own senior senator in the United States, John McCain. Because John McCain was born in the Panama Canal Zone. Now, I just want to say for the record, John McCain is an American citizen. right? He was born to military parents while they were on active duty in the Panama Canal Zone, and that makes him an American citizen. I think there's no question about it. But if this bill were to pass, John would have a problem.